everyone, you're listening to the Storytime Guide podcast with me, Matthew Torres, where every week I discuss stuff like Aztec mythology, horror, comic books, movies, Latino representation, and folktales from around the world. In today's episode, I'm going to be giving you an introduction into Aztec mythology and talking about the first sun. So sit back, relax, because it's story time. So when it comes to Aztec mythology, there's this thing known as the Five Suns. It's the big legend that covers pretty much the entire history of Aztec mythology. Now in this instance, sun, S2E1, is not an actual sun. It's more of like a world or reality, because as you'll find out, it gets destroyed several times. Now we currently live in the fifth sun, or the fifth era, or the fifth reality, or the fifth world, however you want to put it. And so what I'll be doing is giving each sun or reality or world its own episode so we can really dive into that specific sun, that episode, that reality. And so we're beginning with the first sun. Now, as far as creation myths go in Aztec mythology, there's a few of them. A lot of them contradict each other, and you're going to see a lot of contradiction in general in Aztec mythology. So I've looked through all of it. I've kind of got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. This makes sense. This is more story. This is more cinematic. And so I'm going to present to you the first sun, the creation, the start of Aztec mythology. Now, when it comes to Aztec mythology, the beginning, it's Ometeotl. That means the god of duality. It is a man and a woman, or a person who is both a man and both a woman, or two people, or someone who's hermaphroditic and literally both a man and a woman. It kind of depends how you want to view it. Regardless, they're the god of duality. They're the god of light and dark and everything the opposites, right? So Ometeotl creates the gods. Now, after this first step, they're almost never mentioned ever again. This is pretty much the end of it. They're like, hey, all right, I've created everything. Now I'm going to go. And so after Ometeotl kind of creates the gods, not all the gods, but many of the gods, we now have the first sun. So in the era of the first sun, there is kind of a battle for who should be in charge. Now, we don't really know how or why certain gods were chosen to rule what. All we know is that Tezcatlipoca, the lord of the smoking mirror, the god of darkness and magic and evil and masculinity and the night and several other things, and he has all these magical weapons like the smoking mirror, which can see the future, and a dagger, which he calls black wind devoid of life, and a staff, which he can see the darkness in anyone. He's got all these powerful things. He gets chosen to be the ruler of the first reality, and in that first reality are giants. So there are giant people that walk the land. They are the original people. The humans aren't alive yet. No, nothing. It's not even animals. It's just giants. So giants are walking the land during the first sun, and they're worshiping the gods. They do their blood sacrifices. And spoiler for what's ahead, the reason they do blood sacrifices is because the world is a living creature, of which they eventually murder later on. But we'll get to that in the fifth sun. For now, we're in the first sun. The gods want to be praised. They want to be, given the just desert for creating this race of giants. The problem is that while some gods are okay with how the giants are doing it, Tezcatlipoca, who is in charge, is not happy with it. He doesn't like that they're kind of lazy about things. They're giants, so they're happy and they're nice, but they're slow and they're lazy and they take their time with everything. And Tezcatlipoca is not that kind of guy. He's like, look, you're taking too long, you're being too lazy, you got to respect these festivals, you got to do these things. And it's at some point that we get that Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, the feathered serpent, his brother, is not happy, or is happy with the giants, and therefore is not happy with Tezcatlipoca. So Tezcatlipoca starts harming the giants and hurting them. And Quetzalcoatl is like, look, they're worshiping us. They might not be the best at it, but they're worshiping us. Let it go. Now, as of right now, the only two gods really present in the first sun are Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca, so the Lord of the Smoking Mirror and the Feathered Serpent. And for those of you that don't know, the Feathered Serpent Quetzalcoatl is not a snake. He is a regular person. He usually paints himself gray or just doesn't paint himself at all. He's got this really cool spider monkey red mouth mask that can breathe wind and let him walk and hop on wind. He has a fan that can enhance his wind powers. And he can turn into a gigantic feathered snake. Doesn't have wings. People keep drawing Quetzalcoatl with wings. Looks cool. Not in actuality how he looked. He just was a gigantic feathered snake that could fly because he can control the wind. So As far as we know, Quetzalcoatl is the god of he's the god of a lot of things. Look, I'm just going to say that outright. Whenever I mention a god, just assume they're the gods of at least 20 things, right? The main thing is he's the god of justice. He's the god of law, of order, of the wind, and he actually has his own team that he creates later on of just like wind gods. So anyways, the big difference is that Quetzalcoatl doesn't like sacrifice. He's one of the few gods who doesn't like sacrificing. Not animals, not people, not anything. Well, Tezcatlipoca is different. Tezcatlipoca's main way of sacrificing is that every year he lets a giant or a human, because this happens in every world, is that he lets someone live the perfect life. They're worshipped as king. They get everything they want, all the women they want, blah, 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 and they're dressed like Tezcatlipoca, which is to say they paint their bodies black. They have a yellow strap across their face, right where their eyes are. They live this glorious life, and then after, they are brutally sacrificed, right? So they're saying, hey, you're going to live the best year of your life. You're going to get everything you want, but at the end, it's over. Well, that happens, but the giants don't really care too much. And when it comes time for them to sacrifice, they're like, no big deal. That ain't cool with the Lord of the Smoking Mirror. So he decides that he just wants to just start punishing them brutally and savagely, just like, you know what, I'm tired of you guys being lazy. This is it. Well, Quetzalcoatl steps in, and while we don't know the details of how or why, we do know that Quetzalcoatl shoved Tezcatlipoca off of something, or that he pushed him, or that they fought, but the end result is that Tezcatlipoca fell from up high, whether metaphorically or literally, and landed in the lake. So they fought each other, and for whatever reason, Quetzalcoatl beat Tezcatlipoca. Now, as I see this as, this is the anime fight scene, this is the moment where Quetzalcoatl is not quite as strong, because we'll see later on that Tezcatlipoca is stronger than Quetzalcoatl, but in this moment, he's not. I think this is because he probably didn't have his magic, he didn't have his weapons, maybe he trusted his brother, for whatever reason, maybe Quetzalcoatl had gods on his side, we really don't know. So as far as, when it comes to, if you guys are trying to tell these stories in your books or D&D campaigns or whatever, this is where you guys get to run free, right? This is the basic building blocks for that. This is a ruler that was not happy with his servants, giving him the things he felt he deserved, right? Because you're not trying to paint Tezcatlipoca as a villain. He's not villainous. He is hardcore with how he does things, but he's not evil. Vice versa, Quetzalcoatl is the guy that's like the Paladin, Captain America, Superman hero, right? He's like, look, everyone should just be happy with each other, right? We should all hold hands. And you kind of have this balance of good versus not so good. I wouldn't say it's good versus evil. It's like good versus not so good. And so in that era of the First Son, they fight each other, right? And I would say, look, if you're going to write this, if I were to tell this story as a fantasy setting, I would say there are gods that are on Tezcatlipoca's side, and there are gods that are on Quetzalcoatl's side, and eventually they get down to the business, and Quetzalcoatl fights and beats Tezcatlipoca. Because while Tezcatlipoca is a good fighter, and he is really, really good with magic, especially having a lot of magical items, one of the things he doesn't have is that he doesn't have a dragon. So let me kind of dive into this a little bit. So we don't know for certain that Quetzalcoatl had this weapon at the time, but it's assumed he did. So later on, way later on, we're going to again introduce to Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird of the south, aka the god of war. And it's said that Huitzilopochtli, he's kind of the next generation, he's given the Xiuhcoatl by Quetzalcoatl. So the Xiuhcoatl is a comet snake or fire snake or lightning snake. Xiu kind of means a little different depending on how you want to view it, right? But Xiuhcoatl, the comet snake, is a blue club that looks like a snake, and it could breathe fire, it could turn into a dragon, and it was somehow, even though it was a club, was able to cut through and destroy and dismantle gods, which is crazy. There's not many weapons that can do that. So we know that Quetzalcoatl gave Huitzilopochtli that weapon, and so as far as my headcanon and everything is concerned is that he probably had this weapon at the time. And the only other person that we see that has that powerful dragon weapon is Tlaloc, the god of rain. And we know for certain, because of what happens later, that Tlaloc doesn't like Tezcatlipoca, because Tezcatlipoca ends up sleeping with his sister. So my headcanon for all of this would be that the gods and goddesses choose sides, right? You would probably have the god of space. I forget her name, but she is I'm going to look it up really quick if you just give me one moment. Huitzilopochtli's sister. Right? Oh yeah. Coyol Shauqui. Right? Coyol Shauqui. So she's the goddess of space and the moon, and she's Huitzilopochtli's sister. And she is kind of hard. Like when you're saying like, you know, we always kind of talk about good versus evil. She like Tezcatlipoca is more on that not good side, but almost evil. So, and she later gets defeated by her brother. So I would say she would probably join the Tezcatlipoca side. You probably have Itzpopolot. That is the obsidian butterfly is literally what her name translates to. Itzpopolot, obsidian butterfly. She is this hardcore obsidian-fingered, clawed, butterfly harpy-like monster. She's probably on Tezcatlipoca side. And a few other gods, right? So you have them versus Quetzalcoatl, and what it probably came down to was Talak not picking a side, and then when Talak was able to take advantage of the situation, he probably joined in, and my headcanon would paint it like this, right? Quetzalcoatl and his room of, his army of gods show up to Tezcatlipoca's kingdom, they're like, hey bro, or his castle, and they're like, hey, this can't go on anymore. As I see it, you guys, you got to stop this. You're mistreating them. You're going to kill them all. Right? So words are exchanged. They break out into a battle. We get this epic scene. And Talak is likely standing to the side, waiting to see who will win. But even at this point, I would imagine that him and Tezcatlipoca never get along. They never forgive each other. So I would imagine that Tezcatlipoca probably at some point pissed off Talak. So when it comes to Talak, the god of rain, he is a very old god. He is one of the oldest gods. There are very, very few old ancient gods, and Talak is one of them. Quetzalcoatl's another one. And Tezcatlipoca too, but Talak, as far as I'm aware, is the oldest god next to Quetzalcoatl. So Talak is probably not a fan of Tezcatlipoca to begin with. So I would imagine that Talak probably got involved, probably had his own dragon weapon, his own Coatl, and it's probably called the Atcoatl, which is like water snake. He probably got involved, used the dragon snake, boom, beat Tezcatlipoca, and Tezcatlipoca was thrown from his castle into the water. The fighting has been done. The gods are, the gods that lost bow their heads, and everything is happy, and Quetzalcoatl sits on the throne and takes his reign as king, and it begins, except this is Aztec mythology, baby. That is not how happy endings don't often happen. And when they do, they are short-lived. Because Tezcatlipoca wasn't killed. No, in fact, he was wounded drastically. But he had enough magic for one last thing. The army of jaguars. Now, you could put this, if you're writing this as a fantasy, you could put this at any point. But this is when it happens in the mythology of it. Is that after Tezcatlipoca is defeated, he rises from the water, which I could only imagine is you just close your eyes and just imagine this god bloodied and brutal and just walking from the water, and water, dripping off of him, and he's pissed because he just lost his throne. And he uses all the magic he possesses to summon an army of gigantic demon monster jaguars, and they destroy the world. I mean, and that's not even like an exaggeration. He literally kills every single giant. Now, all I can imagine is Quetzalcoatl looking like sitting on his throne, and he's like, yes. And then they're like, dude, you got to come see this. And he looks and he steps, off he looks off the edge of the castle, the heavens above, and he looks down and he just sees thousands, if not millions, of gigantic jaguars brutalizing everyone. And maybe he goes down to try to save people. Maybe he's too weak to. Maybe they stop him. But regardless, Tezcatlipoca in the end wins. He destroys the first sun, the first world, the first reality, rips it to shreds, destroys all the giants. He makes them just, all that's left is bones. And that's the end of the first sun. Now, some few notes, because this is all going to come back later. So, when the giants died, well, it's never explained how, why, or when. The underworld does exist, and this could possibly be the single moment where the underworld does exist. So, when the giants died, they had to go somewhere. And so Mictlan, which is the underworld, which is ruled by Mictlan Tecutli, Lord of the Underworld, that's his name, Mictlan Tecutli. Its name means Mictlan, ruler of. So Mictlan Tecutli, Mictlan, ruler of, which would be ruler of Mictlan, ruler of the underworld. And so Mictlan Tecutli and his wife, Micteca Siwat. So Micteca is undead, or people that are dead, and Siwat is lady of. So you have undead, lady of. So lady of the undead, right? So Mictlantecuhtli, he rules the actual underworld, whereas Mictecasihuat rules over the people in the underworld, right? And they're lovers, they're married, they really don't ever have any problems as far as mythology is concerned, and they're kind of, once again, we're getting in this thing of they're not evil, but they're not good. So they end up taking all the bones, and I just imagine in my head just these hands coming from the ground and just picking all these bones as they arrive, and they create their own, I wouldn't say army, they create their own world of undead, because Mictlan is separated from the rest of the sun. So when we talk about the first sun being destroyed, the second sun being destroyed, etc., Mictlan is separate from that. Mictlan is kind of the underworld that is always where it is. So Mictlantecuhtli and Mictecasihuat, they are assumingly created at this point. They take all the giant's bones, and they'll kind of be reoccurring and have a huge payoff. They're kind of the, if we're like gonna put this in anime terms, Mictlantecuhtli and Mictecasihuat are like the arc 6 or 7 bad guys. they're there, but there's a lot of build up to them. And they're not the ultimate bad guys, but they're there, and they are the bad guys in one of the arc seasons, if we're gonna talk about it like it's a cartoon or anime or show or something. So all the giants their bones are gone. They're pulled into the underworld of Mictlan. Tezcatlipoca disappears off the face of the earth, gone, right? Quetzalcoatl now rules, and it's his job, and now that he has the power as ruler to do so, he creates his own world, his second world, the second sun, the second reality, and it's this world that he puts monkeys in charge. So Tezcatlipoca created giants, Quetzalcoatl's going to create monkeys. And you could argue that's where his mask comes from. Maybe it comes from this era, maybe he had it before, maybe he just like spider monkeys. Regardless, monkeys were the second creation. They're the second race introduced into Aztec mythology. And we'll get to them in next time's episode. But just assure yourself, Tezcatlipoca will be back. That is for absolute certain. Talak will play a huge role in this. So will Chalchiutique. Remember when I said Talak's sister ends up being, happy-go-lucky with Tezcatlipoca? That also comes back. Because you have to know, the 5 sons are pretty much just the feud between two brothers. The feud between Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca. And even though that 2 of them aren't necessarily in major roles in the 3rd and 4th son, they're the main characters of the 1st and 2nd season. They are there in the 3rd and 4th season, and they play humongous parts in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever how you want to put this. Because they are huge characters in this. And I know a lot of people think like, oh, Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, the hummingbirds. He gets his own spin-off series, if we're just like I said, let's just talk about it. Let's just call it spade a spade. Let's just refer to this as, as anime, cartoon show, whatever, right? Mythology. Huitzilopochtli gets his own, spin-off movie, but other than that, he really doesn't play a big role in this. And I'll discuss why that is and how he does have giant repercussions for everything else. But as of now, Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, isn't alive yet. He doesn't exist. We know that gods can die. They don't seem to stay dead. However, it looks like, if I were to kind of simplify it, that when a god dies, they're reborn. So it's very possible that Tezcatlipoca was killed by Quetzalcoatl, and what came from the ocean is a different version of himself. We see a lot of times that they're able to create, especially Tezcatlipoca, creates other gods. So there's other versions of Tezcatlipoca and the other gods, where they're kind of referred to as their twins, their sons, their daughters, their avatars. It depends wildly. Tezcatlipoca himself has good lord, I think over 200 different disguises and names. He has a god called the Rebel Hero. He has a god called what's it? I think it's the Violence, I think is his name. He's got all these crazy names because he's Tezcatlipoca. He's wild. But one of my favorite Tezcatlipocas, and we'll end it in a sec. But one of my favorite Tezcatlipoca personalities is Tepeyolot, the Heart of the Sun, or the Heart of Stone. So the Heart of Stone, or the Heart of Mountain, is a jaguar who helps people. He is a nice guy. He works for Tezcatlipoca, but he's really, really nice. And there's rumors, and depending on how you want to read this, that Tepeyolot, the Heart of Stone, isn't actually a real person. He's just Tezcatlipoca. When Tezcatlipoca wants to do good things, but doesn't want to know that he doesn't want people to know he's doing good things, which is the most Tezcatlipoca thing ever, he pretends to be Tepeyolot. So that's the kind of person you're dealing with when it comes to Tezcatlipoca. He is so mean, and he's like, my reputation is everything. He doesn't even want people to know he does good deeds. Now, all that will come later on when we get to the human era, but right now, that is the end of the first sun. To recap, Quetzalcoatl doesn't think that his brother Tezcatlipoca is doing a good job as king, as ruler of the giants. Tezcatlipoca is being violent and mean to them because they are lazy and they're not worshipping him as he wants to be worshipped. A giant fight breaks out that may or may not involve other gods. They have a battle. Quetzalcoatl wins. Tezcatlipoca is dethroned, and from the literal ashes or from the depths, Tezcatlipoca rises to destroy the earth and completely annihilate it with his jaguar army. And that is the end of the first sun. So tune in next time for the second sun. We'll deep dive into that just like we did with this one. It is going to be really, really fun. The second sun is pretty much part 2 of the first sun. We're going to get Tezcatlipoca coming back. We are going to get Quetzalcoatl fighting for his throne. Will he keep it? Will he lose it? You're just going to have to come and wait and see next time on Storytime Guide Podcast. Have a magical day, everyone.